Mark chapter 8. In those days again, when there was a great multitude and they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to them, I feel compassion for the multitude, because they've remained with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their home, well, they'll faint on the way, and some of them have come from quite a distance. And his disciples answered him, Where will anyone be able to find enough to satisfy these men with bread here in a desolate place? Now, doesn't this sound familiar? Didn't Jesus put them in the same position 2 chapters ago in chapter 6? It seems as though they've forgotten. And it may be because they've forgotten that Christ has put them in this position again, because human beings forget and they need to be reminded. This is a reminding time for Christ. He's reminding them of the power and authority that he has. So they have this huge crowd. He says they need something to eat. Find them something to eat. And they do the same thing. Where are we going to be able to do about this? And so in verse 5, and he asked them, okay, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7. And he directed the multitude to sit down on the ground, just like he did in chapter 6. And taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks and broke them, just as he did in chapter 6, and started giving them to his disciples to serve them, just like he did before. And they served them to the multitude. And they also had a few fish. Imagine that. And after he had blessed them, he ordered these to be served as well. And they ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 7 large baskets full of what was left over of the broken pieces. Now, how many baskets did they pick up of the fish and loaves in chapter 6? 12. This time they picked up 7. There is significance in these numbers, by the way, 12 and 7. And in verse 4, as far as the 4,000, and about 4,000 in verse 9 were there. And he sent them away. And immediately he entered the boat with his disciples and came to the district of Dalmanutha. And the Pharisees came out and began to argue with him. It's almost as though the Bible, the way it's written, as soon as he, hits the shore or enters the place, it's like the ants come out to take, whatever he is away. The Pharisees are depicted that way. And the Pharisees came out and right away and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. Now, I'm sure that he was able to do whatever and go to the synagogue perhaps, and there's time lapse here. But yeah, that's what happened. As they came to him and started arguing with him and wanted a sign from heaven, and sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, Why does this generation seek for a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. And leaving them, he again embarked and went away to the other side. Now, so think about this for a second. You know that the Pharisees are Jewish, and so the other side must mean the Greek area, the Hellenized area. There are no Pharisees there. No wonder he wanted to go there all the time. And leaving them, he again embarked and went away to the other side. And they had forgotten to take bread, talking about they are his apostles, and did not have more than 1 loaf in the boat with them. And he was giving orders to them, saying, Watch out, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. A lot of bread stuff in this chapter, isn't there? And they began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread, because their stomachs were beginning to say, hey, I need something. And Jesus, in verse 17, aware of this, said to them, Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet see or understand? Do you have a hardened heart? What's a hardened heart? A closed mind? Are you not enlightened yet? Having eyes, verse 18, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? Here he goes, he's going to bring it up. When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces you picked up? Do you remember that number? And they said, 12. And Jesus said, and when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, How many large baskets of broken pieces do you pick up? And they said, 7. And he was saying to them, do you not yet understand? And they came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him, and entreated him to touch him. And taking the blind man by the hand, he brought him out of the village, and after spitting on his eyes, and laying his hands upon him, he asked him, do you see anything? And he looked up and he said, I see men. I'm seeing them like trees walking about. Then again he laid his hands on his eyes, and he looked intently and was restored and began to see everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, don't even go into the village. Verse 27. And Jesus went out along with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way he questioned his disciples, saying to them, who do people say that I am? The mouth of the Jordan River is at a place called Caesarea Philippi, or Caesarea Philippi, named after Philip, which I believe it was the Philip who was the father of Alexander the Great, King Philip of Macedonia, but I could be wrong about that. But then Caesar came along and they wanted to name it after him. No, that's a very terrible history. But Caesarea Philippi. What was important about Caesarea Philippi was that it was a pagan worship center. And you can go there today and stand probably in the same location as Christ was when he gives this talk. And the place was a temple to the god Pan. And there were a lot of pretty raucous things that were going on there in the day. So they're there at Caesarea Philippi, and on the way, or they're going there, and on the way he questioned his disciples, saying, who do people say that I am? So they told him, saying, John the Baptist. Well, John the Baptist is dead, and everyone knows that John the Baptist is dead. So why would they think he's John the Baptist? Could it be because they believed in reincarnation? Could it be they believed in some kind of spirit transfer from a spirit from a dead body to a living body? And what would become of the spirit that's in the living body? Some say John the Baptist. Others say Elijah. Well, if he's Elijah, Elijah died hundreds of years before Christ. So then that would have to be a reincarnation. Does the Bible teach or speak of reincarnation? It's doing it right here. Others say you're one of the prophets. Again, how could he be one of the prophets unless he's a prophet reborn? Interesting things to consider. And he continued to question them, but who do you say that I am? And Peter answered and said to him, you are the Christ, the anointed one. And he warned them to tell no one about him. Verse 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed and after 3 days rise again. He began to teach them that the Son of Man, what does Son of Man mean? Son of Man just means human being. There are several people in the scriptures who are called Son of Man. In fact, Elijah was one of them. The significance of Son of Man in this context is that the anointed one is the chosen Son of Man. And Christ was anointed when? At his baptism. So, begin to teach that the Son of Man, or the anointed one, must suffer many things, okay, and be rejected, Okay, by whom? Well, by all the officials, the Jewish officials, by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes. Okay, who are the elders? Well, there were several governing bodies in the Jewish world. Okay, one of them was the Sanhedrin, which was a 71-member ruling class made up largely of Sadducees and Pharisees, but I've understood it to be a little bit more Sadducee heavy. Sadducees were the wealthy class of the Jewish social division. Pharisees were the strict legalistic class of that division. And there were also a group of older gentlemen who probably had been in the Sanhedrin at some time, who were known as the elders, and they were probably a larger number than the 71 Sanhedrin. And so they resided over the Sanhedrin in a way. So if he's supposed to be rejected by the elders, that's a big deal. If he's supposed to be rejected by the chief priests, that's a big deal. And you have to understand that there is a hereditary line of chief priests, but at this time in Jesus' life, the hereditary line of chief priests had been circumvented about AD 15 by the fourth Roman prefect of Judea, Valerius Gratus, who fired chief priest Annas and inserted a number of successors whom he sequentially fired as well, before he put in a guy named Caiaphas, who actually turned out to be the son-in-law of Annas, but Caiaphas was not the real chief priest. A lot of drama, a lot of politics going on here. So anyway, his rejection by the chief priests would mean that the Roman puppet chief priest was going to give him a thumbs down. Okay, so Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priest and the scribes. Who are the scribes? The scribes were a class, an educated class, who did all the writing for the Sanhedrin and copying the texts and scrolls and things like this. So all of the upper class was going to reject him. What do you need to be successful in a community? You need to be accepted by the upper class. Where's all the money? Where's all the politics? Where's all the schmoozing going on? Well, the upper class has all of that. And so what Jesus is saying, man, I'm going to be rejected by all the authorities. It's going to happen. And be killed. Okay, so they're going to reject me and they're going to kill me. But after 3 days, the Son of Man will rise again. Verse 32, and he was stating the matter plainly. Now this stuff, even if you state it plainly, is difficult to understand. It's mystical. It's abstract. You know, dead people don't rise again. You can't predict the future. This is all things that even stating the matter plainly doesn't let it kind of sink in and be understood. And then, this was so weird in verse 32 that Peter took him aside and began to, the Bible says, rebuke him. What does rebuke? It means to kind of set him in his place. Come on, you're talking crazy stuff here. We're not going to let that happen to you. But turning around and seeing his disciples, Peter was doing it in front of the disciples. He rebuked Peter and said these famous words, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's." All right. Get behind me. Basically is just get away from me. And he called him Satan. Is he saying that Satan had inhabited his body? No, he's not. In my estimation, if we look at the Hebrew word Satan, simply means adversary. These guys are Hebrews. Even though this is the New Testament, they're still operating in Old Testament times because Christ hasn't been killed and risen yet, right? So the New Testament is not present yet. So we're still talking about a Hebrew notion that there is an adversary, and that Satan, the word Satan means adversary. Is what I'm trying to say. And so Jesus is saying, get behind me. You're my adversary on this. You're not setting your mind on God's interests. You're setting it on man's. Okay? Maybe we could get a little bit, I guess, esoteric about things and say, no, he is calling him Satan. He's referring to Jesus as Satan because he's acting and trying to convince Jesus not to fulfill his divine role, which is what Satan would want. But that's kind of, to me, that's a little bit of a reach. I acknowledge that it could go either way, but I'm just thinking that, this is his disciples, this is his group, these are basically his sons, and I don't think he's going to call a man Satan. My opinion. 34. And he summoned the multitudes with his disciples, and he said to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, there are a few things he's got to do. Number one, he's got to deny himself. What's that mean? It means put yourself in your mind, put yourself last. Deny yourself. Okay? And then you've got to take up your cross. Take up your cross. We haven't had the cross yet. Well, take up the cross means I'm going to do whatever struggle needs to happen in order to follow. And number three, follow me. Follow me. Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. These three things are things we need to do if we want to follow Jesus. It's putting ourselves away. It's setting Christ in front. It's moving forward with the burden of this commitment. He says, whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's shall save it. What does this mean? Whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it. Well, if you think that you're going to be better off and save your life, be better off without taking up your cross and following Christ, then you're going to lose your life. Because you need to be on the path of Christ consciousness and development in that way. But if you lose your life for my sake, that's what he's saying is, if you choose to deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me and lose your life as you've known it up to this point, well, you're going to save it in the end. Makes perfect sense. Verse 36, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? I think this is pretty self-explanatory. If you are living a life in pursuit of possessions, things, promotions, money, you're gaining the whole world, but you're not working on who you really are. You're going to lose that part of who you are, your soul. So what good does it do to have all the stuff when you die? There's the old adage, you can't take it with you. That's an absolute truism. And so your soul is going forward without all the stuff in which you placed such priority. So why place the priority? Why don't you focus more on your personal development, your soul's development? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? He said. Your soul is the most valuable thing. It is you. It's not like you own it. You don't own it. So what will you give in exchange for it? Nothing. You can't. Nothing is worth the soul. Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, he says, in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man, I, will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. The Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when the Son of Man comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Okay, that's Mark chapter 8. We took some time to explain a few things, and I hope that it made sense. If you have anything else, feel free to contact me. I welcome any kind of contact. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.